Hello, this is Professor Sultanat Liebert at VCU. Today's topic is data collection. In social sciences and in program evaluation, we can use quantitative methods to collect data, qualitative methods, or a mixed method approach that combines quantitative and qualitative data. Today's lecture will focus on qualitative methods of data collection. Next week's lecture will focus more on the quantitative data collection methods. Qualitative researchers study people and events in their own context, seeking to understand them in their natural setting. Qualitative research maintains a holistic approach in which variables are considered in their context and not in an abstract setting. Qualitative studies rely more on words and narrative rather than numbers and statistical analyses. There are a number of advantages to conducting qualitative research. Qualitative methods allow researchers to be aware of the perspective of study participants to a much greater extent than quantitative methods can. Researchers can also better understand the dynamic developments that might be taking place at the research site. Qualitative research methods also allow researchers to be aware of the influence of context and take contextual factors into account. Researchers using qualitative methods are also able to adapt their research strategies. This is called adaptive research design. And finally, qualitative researchers typically recognize that their background might influence their perspective on social phenomena being studied, what we refer to as reflexivity by the researcher. For example, I'm an immigrant, and when I study immigration-related topics, my background certainly affects my perspective on the topic. So I need to be cognizant of my background to make sure that I'm examining the subject of my research objectively and in a balanced way. This slide lists different approaches to sampling in qualitative research. In this presentation, I will highlight a couple of common approaches. If you want to learn more about other types of sampling strategies in qualitative research, Miles and Huberman's 1994 book on qualitative data analysis is a good starting point. Snowball sampling is a non-probability sampling method used when characteristics to be possessed by study participants are difficult to find or the population of interest is difficult to reach. For example, in my research of undocumented immigrants from the former Soviet Union, I used snowball sampling. I first identified 2 potential study participants and then asked them to make introductions to their peers. Without personal introductions, I doubt that the study participants would agree to speak to me. Ultimately, I ended up with a sample of 42 individuals, most of whom were recruited through snowball sampling. Another qualitative sampling method is convenience sampling. Convenience sampling is a type of non-probability sampling method that relies on data collection from population members who are conveniently available to participate in the study. Facebook polls are a good example of convenience sampling. There is a wide variety of qualitative research methods. They include ethnography, participant observation, informal interviews, formal interviews, which can be semi-structured or structured, and focus groups. Often, more than one of these methods is used in one study. For example, in the study that I mentioned earlier on undocumented immigrants from the former Soviet Union, I used participant observation and semi-structured interviews. The first method I'll talk about is ethnography. Ethnography is typically used by anthropologists when they study a culture that is unknown to them. A researcher using ethnographic methods usually spends a long time in the field, participating in activities with the people whom they're studying and observing what they do. Ethnographers would also talk to people they study about what they think and mean in order to understand and absorb the norms and ideas of their subjects. Participant observation is somewhat similar to ethnography, but the priority of the researcher is observation. Participation is a way to get close to the action. The researcher often takes on the role being studied, for example, working as a firefighter or immersing oneself in the biker culture. It gives the participant observer a sense of what it's like to be a firefighter or a biker. Observation is a qualitative research method commonly used in education. A researcher can observe how a teacher interacts with students in the classroom and gauge the effectiveness of the teacher's pedagogical techniques or classroom management skills. Observation research can be long-term or short-term. The researcher needs to be as unobtrusive as possible. Observation is most effective as a research method when the researcher can blend in with the others. Interviews are a very common qualitative research method. Interviews can be formal or informal. In informal interviews, the researcher has a general sense of what he or she wants to find out from the interviewee, but does not know enough to generate a full list of interview questions. The interviewer would ask a few general questions and then hones more specific questions as she gets oriented to the situation. Formal interviews can be structured or semi-structured. In structured interviews, the researcher follows a strict interview protocol. This allows the researcher to obtain consistent information from each study participant. Formal interviews are often preceded by informal interviews. In semi-structured interviews, the researcher follows an interview protocol loosely, but if the conversation goes in the direction that generates new research insights, the researcher can shift direction and ask additional questions, or even replace some planned questions with new ones. Focus group interviews involve a group of individuals with certain characteristics who participate in a focused discussion on a given topic or issue. Focus groups are useful for pilot testing data collection instruments or for understanding quantitative findings. Typical focus group research is conducted in marketing when the manufacturer or advertising professionals try to understand a target group's reaction to a specific product. Key features of focus groups include group size. It's typically 4 to 9 people. Questions need to be carefully sequenced and focus on the topic. Focus group discussions should be led by a trained and skilled moderator. Focus group participants usually have something in common that is key to a research topic. For example, if a study is about school climate, the focus group would include parents with children in the same school. The final research method I want to discuss today is mixed method research. It is becoming more popular in academia and is often touted as the optimal research design. Mixed method research typically combines quantitative and qualitative data. For example, I collect quantitative data through a survey. A share of respondents indicate that they will not vote in the upcoming elections. I could follow up with qualitative interviews to find out why. So mixed methods are very useful for explaining findings from quantitative research. There are specific data analysis techniques that are used with each of the qualitative research methods you've learned about today. We'll discuss these data analysis strategies later in the semester. For now, this is the end of the lecture on qualitative methods of data collection. Thank you for your attention and take care.